Bom dia a todos e todas.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our event, our webinar, Digital Solutions for Green Hydrogen Certification in Brazil. My name is Fernando Paraíso, and I'm coordinator for sustainability at the Brazilian and German Chamber, and I'm the moderator of our event. And just short messages, people at the YouTube channels, welcome to you all. And I want to ask you to interact with us through our chat box. Please ask your questions, talk among yourselves, and we really want you to interact with all. And while you ask your questions, our team will try to answer your questions, to interact with our presenters too. To begin with our event, this is an event that is organized by the H2UP, that is international program for the hydrogen incentive that is supported by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Actions and implemented by the GIZ in cooperation with the German-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce and Industry of São Paulo. And we want to get together the main actors in the world of hydrogen certification in Brazil and abroad. And we want to understand how digital solutions can help us in this market. And before we begin our discussion, our debate, it's also important to mention that we have international and national speakers. We have simultaneous translation. We have 2 channels on YouTube, 2 lives on YouTube. In order for you to follow the event in your own language, please feel free to ask your questions in English or Portuguese. We will collect them all and bring them into our discussion. So now, after this initial messages, I want to invite for this initial part Isabela Santos from GIZ. Isabela is the coordinator for H2UP, and she will say to us some welcome words, and then we will share our agenda of the day. Isabela, welcome. The floor is yours. Thank you, everyone. Hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Isabela Santos, I'm the coordinator of the H2UP program in Brazil. Welcome to all of you at this webinar. It's a pleasure to be here for the digital solutions of certification in Brazil. Many companies have this doubt already, and there are many questions that are still open. And I'm happy to be here, being part of this webinar. H2UP, I don't know if you know, it's an instrument that was created by the German government, by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Actions to support German and Brazilian companies to get into the hydrogen market in Brazil. And the idea of this instrument of fomentation, of support, is it's important to mention that H2UP works with the commerce chambers, German commerce chambers in Brazil. And interesting, once they have the ideas, they can talk to us at the H2UP and explain they have the interest of working together with the H2UP. And we have 2 PPPs and 1 with Petra Krupp. Thank you very much to be here, part of this webinar. And she also will have a presentation. And the idea of this project is to enlarge the cooperation between Germany and Brazil in the hydrogen sector. H2UP has also the objective to tighten the connection between Germany and Brazil through their companies. So thank you very much for all the participants that are watching us on YouTube. Thank you very much, Fernando. I wish you all a good day and a great webinar. Thank you, Isabela. So, no question that this will be great. We follow many initiatives to incentivize the hydrogen market in Brazil, and really, H2 Up is what makes these ideas tangible. You bring the great ideas and transform them in concrete projects. So it will be great to follow this case of this initiative. And before we begin in the Peter's presentation, I want to show you our agenda. How will this work in the next 90 minutes? We will get to the first panel after my initial words. And then we will have the presentation. After Peter's presentation, we will have Vanessa's presentation from ASAP, and afterwards we will have a moment for questions and answers. Please write your questions into our chat. Then we will have our second channels, and then we will talk about the Brazilian experience about the hydrogen certification. We will have Rodolfo from CCEE, that is the Chamber for Energy Commerce in Brazil, and we will also have the participation of the manager of Eletrobras. And the same interaction, we will have time for Q&A, and afterwards we will go over to a next session where all the speakers will interact and they will answer some questions and answers, and then we have a closing session. That's our agenda for today. And before we begin, it is a quick message for our public. We will have this in our chat too, as Isabela mentioned already. H2 Up is in Brazil and in other countries. And on the 20th of March next week, we will get to know another project that H2 Up was able to promote, and this will be promoted by the AHK from Uruguay, the German Commerce Chamber of Uruguay. So you're already invited. Here's the QR code. And without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen. And I want to invite our first presentation of the day. I want to invite Vanessa. Vanessa is senior consultant for energy economics. Vanessa is our first international speaker. So Vanessa, welcome. And the questions we will ask in Portuguese because our translator will translate the questions into English. So maybe we have a little delay, but please feel free to send us your questions in the chat. Vanessa, welcome. The floor is yours. Please share your presentation. We already seen your screen. You have the floor. Good presentation.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. A warm welcome from my side. As the title suggests, we have analyzed various certification processes available for the European market in detail. We conducted the study on behalf of GIZ to support their public-private partnership with SAP. Therefore, in the project, we also closely cooperated with SAP. And in the following, I will provide a very brief insight into the results of our study. Certification is an essential part of the regulatory requirements to trade green Power-to-X products, and it is therefore crucial for the success of a sustainable hydrogen economy. So therefore, the governing aim of the study can be described threefold. First, we wanted to inform a wide variety of interested stakeholders. Here, the focus was on project developers who have the intention of obtaining a green certificate for their green Power-to-X products. So the second aim was that we also wanted to provide a comprehensive understanding of the similarities and differences between the current certification schemes in the EU. This knowledge can, for example, serve as a targeted support for the development of regulatory requirements to trade green Power-to-X products. And the overall objective was, of course, to serve the interest in the future digitalization of the certification process. Digitalization can help to improve the transparency, traceability, and cost efficiency. And in order to serve the need for information in this regard, we clarified open questions on data requirements and stakeholders involved in the issuing of certificates. For each certification scheme, which we analyzed in detail, we provided an overview, a step-by-step guide to the certification process, and a case study with practical relevance, either for hydrogen, ammonia, or methanol. The findings presented in the study are derived from our own interpretation of public available documents, and we have also gained valuable insights from interviews and workshops with certification actors. The report can be downloaded on the website of GSZ. The three schemes that were selected for analysis or for detailed analysis was Certify, TÜV Rheinland, and ISCC. And for the sake of completeness, we also did analysis of the Power-to-X futures of TÜV Süd, but not of the certification process. We think that a thorough analysis of the certification schemes enables a more informed decision-making about the certification processes. It is important to make clear that all examined certification schemes, which you can see here, can only be used for the voluntary or reporting market for Power-to-X products. So this means that they cannot be applied to prove target compliance for RFNBOs. So it is not possible to get access, for example, to the financial incentives for RFNBOs. What is interesting to note is that except for the Certify scheme, all shown certification schemes are applicable globally. So this means that they could also be, in principle, applied for domestic purposes by companies in Brazil. This slide shows one of our study findings, which I think is quite important. One of the criteria whether hydrogen or a Power-to-X derivative is considered green or renewable is the achieved green hydrogen gas emission savings in regard to a defined threshold. However, we have noticed that not only the product carbon footprint calculation methodologies varied, but also the life cycle coverage varied very much. So in consequence, the resulting product carbon footprints are not comparable between the different certification schemes. Simply speaking, this means that under one scheme, hydrogen or a product might be considered green, and under the other one, not. This is another slide showing one of our findings. As already said, we have analyzed the certification process in detail and described all the different steps which are necessary. It was obvious that the certification process involves a lot of series of actions to be carried out, and that a lot of different participants are involved until finally a certificate can be issued. So this detailed analysis made it quite clear that one of the key challenges in Power-to-X certification is that many different companies are involved along the supply chain, between which information must be exchanged to ensure a successful certification process. And I think this is where digital solutions have enormous potential and can make a valuable contribution to improve the integrity, efficiency, and also safety of the entire process. And by doing this, they can pave the way for a more modern global green hydrogen economy. I have already reached my presentation, so the end of my presentation. You will, of course, find more information in the report. Thank you very much for your interest and attention.
Muito obrigado, Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. So this is an incentive for all those who want to have more information, entering the website and getting to the report that was done, where there is more in-depth information for people to get updates. Now, for those who have questions, please feel free to place them in the chat, and later on we can forward them to Vanessa. So to continue our panel, I will now invite Peter Koop. Peter is a global leader for energy transition in SAP. Peter, welcome, and feel free now to show your presentation, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Estamos vendo sua tela.
Yes, we can hear you and we can see your presentation.
Okay, perfect. I have a second monitor, therefore excuse me that I'm not looking at my camera, but on the left for the presentation, more or less. Okay, let's see. So I'm just continuing what Vanessa was saying. Yeah. So how can we actually help you, all the companies, and there are plenty in the whole value chain to be successful in the future low carbon hydrogen market? I rushed a little bit through that slide. I assume that everybody here in the call is a hydrogen expert. This is more like to set the scene. How is hydrogen produced at the moment? So the 94 million tons mainly fossil fuel-based production in 2022 hasn't much changed in 2023. And here more on the right side, the use from the use case perspective. So oil refining, chemical. That's the main use case today, and then in the future, of course, additional use cases like steel industry and power generation, aviation, marine fuel, especially with methanol. And then, of course, the hydrogen ladder. What are, let's say, scenarios that are useful, and what are scenarios that are potentially not so useful or not competitive? Yeah, but we mentioned already colors before. Colors is interesting to see how it is in principle produced. Yeah, but we see here on the wide range of CO2 that can be applied to color, that in the end, color is, or let's say the production method is one interesting information, but the real interesting information for regulation and especially for end customers is how much CO2 equivalents are attached to, let's say, a kilogram of hydrogen or a ton of hydrogen or methanol or ammonia that you get delivered and that you then use for your process. And you see the ranges vary extremely. Therefore, this value is the real value that is interesting, and not if it's in principle green or if it's based from electricity or whatever, because you see there's so much overlap in that in the end only the CO2 equivalent number counts, plus of course additional interesting information that is relevant for voluntary certification and also for mandatory regulation. But of course, in the end, all the certification needs in the end data. Without data, and like Vanessa said, without the possibility to transport the data from one player to the other in a secure, easy way, the whole process won't work. And then Vanessa already mentioned a couple of schemes that were more in depth analyzed in the study, but in reality, of course, globally seen, there are much more. And therefore, we talk about from a zoo of standard schemes and regulations. And we cannot expect to have one global regulation in the next few years. Maybe it will never happen. And therefore, from a digital perspective, it's completely important to think about the methodology. How do you set up the systems in the sense that you can cover all these different regulations? If you are if you are a supplier that ships, let's say, hydrogen or ammonia, methanol from Australia to South Korea or Japan, or from Brazil to Germany, or from Brazil to North America, or from North Africa to Europe, and so on. Always other regulation applies, and we have to, and in the future it will be also. Therefore, it's totally important to think about, okay, how do you do this actually? And before I go a little bit more into details, I just want to give you our strategy. So we want to support you at SAP plus our partners with the whole certification process, like it was mentioned before, the tracking and tracing of the hydrogen and derivatives through the complete value chain. So not only production, but like it was mentioned on the slides from Vanessa, through the whole value chain till it reaches the end customer, and even then continuing with the data with their products, be it a ton of green steel or whatever chemicals, solving the mass balancing problem when of course hydrogen and the other products made out of hydrogen are mixed in storage and in transport, with, let's say, more with the classical high carbon equivalents of these products. Calculating, of course, of the CO2 equivalence footprint for the whole value chain till it reaches the end customer. And then, of course, that's not only our mission. Of course, we can support you with finance, planning, building, operating, maintaining your equipment, and so on. This is more or less our standard software that we already have, but the other pieces are, let's say, relatively new pieces and all in the cloud, and the rest is, of course, our SAP portfolio, like it has been already there before. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper into the regulatory requirements and customer needs. So before we started that journey, we thought about the right methodology and principles to give actually regulation the flexibility to do the regulation they need to, as fast as possible, create the market. So that nobody can say, hey, our IT cannot handle that. And the regulators have to...
Peter, Entschuldigung, dass ich Sie störe. Können Sie etwas lauter sprechen?
Ja, okay.
Wir hören Sie leider nicht hier bei der Übersetzung.
Okay, ich versuche mal ein bisschen lauter zu machen.
Danke.
Hört man mich besser jetzt?
Ja, vielen Dank. Ist wesentlich besser.
Alles klar, okay. Dann, and then what is totally important also is we are all only thinking regulation, certification at the moment, but the most important stuff is what do the end customers need? So what does a chemical company need for what kind of data and information do they need? For when they buy a low carbon hydrogen or products made out of hydrogen, and the same with the steel company, just to mention two examples. And then also to work together with certification bodies to make this process as automated as possible is also an important topic. And the methodology that we are looking at here is really like take the most granular and precise data that is there. Even if regulation at the beginning says, okay, whatever, you can have a certain aggregation level, and then maybe like in Europe, you get year after year, it gets more detailed. We say do it as exact as possible now, then you don't have to cope with regulations that get sharper over time or change over time, because you do it anyway as exact as possible, and nobody can ask you to do it more exact, because that's physically the best you can deliver from the very beginning. To do it transparent, that means all your calculations have to be transparent. I mean, when you calculate CO2 equivalents, what did you do? What assumptions have been there? What was really measured data? Transport this information through the value chain in a most secure way. And then, of course, systems have to be technical interoperable. That means we cannot assume that everybody will be on the whole planet that are part of the future low carbon hydrogen market will use SAP. So there will be, of course, competitive solutions, and they have to, let's say, be technically interoperable so that they can exchange data in a secure and very easy way. And then independency is, of course, also important in our opinion, because would Shell buy IT solutions from Equinor or from BP or whatever? Very likely not. So I think that has to come from neutral players like SAP. And then that's important for the customers here in the call, or the companies, that have to do something with hydrogen in the value chain. Once you have the final investment decision, think about not only about your hardware problems, your demand and supply problems, the pricing problem, all relevant problems, but also how to set up the let's say the digital infrastructure in the most efficient way. Let's just do a fast example. We don't have much time here. I will rush a little bit through that. We just take the ammonia value chain, from renewable electricity production, water electrolysis, and then ammonia production, because ammonia is for long distance shipping or travel of hydrogen, let's say one of the potential candidates, and of course a candidate or a product that you can sell directly, because ammonia is the world basis for fertilizer production. Or you crack it then back if you want to, of course, use hydrogen as the end product. Here, a little bit more details on the production side, just for your reference in the slides. And now the important stuff comes. What do I mean with this methodology of granularity? When, for example, we calculate how much CO2 equivalent is on a kilogram of hydrogen when it comes out of the electrolyzer, how would you do this in the most exact way, looking at physics and the relevant data that is there? I mean, when a renewable electricity provider puts electricity into the grid in large amounts, then it's measured with an interval meter. In Germany, for example, in 15-minute intervals. In other countries, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 1 hourly. And that's the most exact data that you can get. And that is measured on the supply side and also on the demand side. In this case, here are the electrolyzers. And then you have your power purchase agreements between these two companies, or a couple of suppliers to maybe a couple of electrolyzers. And when you take the difference and you can prove that in each 15-minute interval, let's say your 20 megawatts or your 500 megawatts that you took out of the grid for your electrolyzers was covered by renewable electricity production. And that is then also applying to regulation, like with additionality, that it maybe was relatively newly built, or that the distance between, let's say, the producers and the electrolyzers was not too much, so that it's clear that really the electricity reaches also via the grid the electrolyzers. Then you can say, okay, I was operationally have zero CO2 equivalent emissions. But if you take the assets of the production of the wind parks and the solar farms into account, then of course there is a CO2 equivalent. And then what you can do is, if you take more out of the grid, there are services that can calculate how much CO2 was on a kilowatt hour additionally taken out of the grid, where you cannot prove where it directly came from, like with the power purchase agreements with your renewable providers. And then you can really calculate. And of course, if you are, let's say, take desalinated water in let's say, in areas like Saudi Arabia, Oman, and so on, where this happens, then of course you also have to calculate the CO2 that is on top of the let's say, tons of water that you, or liters of water that you use in the electrolyzer. But with all that data, you can exactly calculate how much CO2 is on a mass of hydrogen that comes out of the electrolyzer. And then this data, depending on the value chain that is behind that, is put into a system that solves this mass balancing problem and calculate and transports this information through the value chain. And we have a system called Green Token that can does that. So we build a digital twin of a mass of hydrogen, let's say a kilogram. And then you could be anything, could be also a gram. Then you don't have the problem of that the token is less than a token is less than a cent worth. So that would be, even from a financial process perspective, easier, but doesn't matter what you choose. Just as an example, let's take a kilogram here. And on top of that kilogram, you can put as many attributes as you want. So the CO2 equivalents, the method of production, like water electrolysis, when was the renewable power plant, is it a unique identifier for the wind park or the solar plant, then when was it built? What's the geolocation of that plant? What's the geolocation of the of your hydrogen, where the electrolyzer is, where the hydrogen production is, and so on. So all interesting information that could be relevant for certification and digitalization you put as attributes on top of that digital twin, and we use in a blockchain in the background, so that there are wallets, and you can define the wallets like you want. But at least each player has one, maybe even more. And then you move, when the hydrogen moves through the value chain, you also move, let's say, the data of the wallets from one player to the other. So with that, you avoid double counting, because all the data that was before in the wallet of one player is then transferred to the others with all the then they cannot sell it again and say and claim, I sell it to somebody else. So this is impossible, because obviously then in the blockchain you can see exactly what is happening, and the auditors also they will have then access to the whole blockchain. They can then really see from the end product when it goes to the chemical company that does something with the hydrogen, for example. They can even see in the whole chain, okay, where have been the renewable power plants that produce the electricity for that. And in the end, you know exactly what you deliver to the end customer. And then you add in transport the CO2 of the different transport modes. In this case, because we choose as an example the ammonia value chain, you of course calculate how much CO2 comes in the ammonia plant on top of the product, in this case the hydrogen, and then you transfer it to ammonia, and then maybe if you crack it back, how much CO2 equivalents come from that again. And in the end, you are able then to deliver the data, like I said, to the end customer. And in between, like I said, just make an example, a ship that goes from Brazil to Rotterdam in Europe, and reaches then European, let's say, territory first time. With our system, we would simply take the attributes for the relevant mandatory and voluntary certifications that is then that you choose or that you have to do, and pull it up in a digital form, so that the auditors and the people from governments can directly see the data, see, okay, it's all okay from a regulation perspective. But you, and on the other hand, have the most granular data that you then can transfer to your end customer, so that you can prove not only it's green, but you can exactly say, okay, that's the CO2 equivalence on top of, let's say, a ton of hydrogen that you deliver. And then, of course, companies like Koop that and other steel companies, or BASF as one of the largest chemical companies, they can take this data and also calculate that they need to calculate their products, what CO2 equivalence is actually on their products. And for example, BASF has already a tool called Scott to do this, and they calculate for their 45,000 different chemical products globally, calculate the CO2 equivalent. And of course, if they don't get the right data in the input, the output data from their tool is also incorrect. Therefore, they are totally interested to get the most exact data and to also understand how it was calculated. And that here, what you see is our, let's say, our solution architecture slide. So we talked about energy data management, in this case, our SAP Cloud for Energy, to store the time series data from the electricity, let's say from the electricity production and also from the consumption side. Then we have a partner called Prologa Energy. They have created a Cloud for Hydrogen production and supply management system, where the CO2 equivalents are calculated, and you can do product management for your hydrogen products, that you define the product that the end customer needs or that a certain regulation or subsidy scheme requires. And then the data is given over to Green Token, and Green Token transport that data through the whole value chain. And some of the attributes will change, like the CO2 equivalence. They potentially will increase, and other data will be fixed from the very beginning, like whatever the geolocation of the renewable power plant. And then, of course, we have other solutions, but we don't have time now to go into details how to support certain topics like complex power purchase agreement management, or CO2 European trading on management of these assets, because that's of course direct money, or how to sell it and how to bill it later and even trade it. And this is just to finish that up here, a little bit more depth into the product management, that we create different buckets of hydrogen, let's say of same qualities, and then if you create the products, you take simply the information out of the buckets and put it in green token, and then you know exactly, okay, let's say this amount of hydrogen that is maybe in that storage tank has that qualities, and these qualities you can track through the whole value chain till you deliver it to the final end customer. And there's another study in addition to the Fichtner study. So I was a co-author of this study, standardizing hydrogen certification, together with Dr. Maximilian Kuhn from Hydrogen Europe, and it was published by H2 Global Foundation in cooperation with Hydrogen Europe. And here you see the link, so you can also download it here. And then in the appendix you find some more let's say slides that go into the digital product passport for hydrogen, which is then the future vision what we are going to. But now let's open up for some questions.
Muito obrigado, Peter.
Correct.
Legal que já a gente viu outro estudo, né? A gente recebeu
Thank you very much, Peter. We received some questions from our public in the YouTube channel. One to Vanessa and another question to you, Peter. So first of all, I would like to begin with the question that we received for Vanessa. It's a very simple one, but some people did not understand it. The report that you created, Vanessa, where can they download it?
I honestly cannot give you the link right now. It is not yet on the website of GIZ, but it will be published on the website of GIZ very soon. I think until the end of March it should be available for download. I think GIZ has a library where all their publications are stored, but it should be able to be found via Googling the title, hopefully.
Perfeito, obrigado, Vanessa. E a gente recebeu uma pergunta aqui para o Peter.
And we received a question for Peter. Fábio Cerqueira asked this question. He is asking if SAP uses public blockchain to make the data to be reliable and to be transparent.
We use Ethereum in the background, and it's a private blockchain in this case, because all, let's say, the players in the value chain, of course, are known. So if you produce hydrogen, I mean, let's say you would be the first player in that value chain, of course, using the data from the renewable power plants, which is then in time series, which then is in part of or inside an energy data management system. But then when you then, let's say, ship the hydrogen or ammonia or methanol through the value chain, of course, it goes to transport companies, it goes to harbors, it goes into storage, it goes into maybe the large transportation grid, and then into more distribution grid, and then finally it goes maybe to the final company. So you have a lot of players involved, but it's not like open like in a Bitcoin or so that anybody can anonymously be part of that, and then you need high security mechanisms which make the electricity consumption of such a blockchain extremely high, which is with a private blockchain not the case. So our this blockchain has an electricity demand like any other cloud solution that you run as in a business, like an ERP system or something. So that is therefore it's a private blockchain where all the players in that blockchain are known.
Obrigado. Bom, a gente está aqui já com o nosso tempo no limite. Eu vou fazer uma última pergunta que a gente recebeu aqui do chat para o Peter. antes da gente ir para o nosso próximo painel, como será feita
That's the last question to Peter. How will be done the traceability of ammonia and green hydrogen in the certificate? That's a question for Peter.
Yeah, the traceability is secured via, let's say, our green token system. Yeah, so you have, I mean, all the steps, all the wallets you defined before. I mean, where is the hydrogen actually going? Yeah, and then you can track every mass of hydrogen or ammonia or methanol that goes through the value chain, and also historically. Yeah, it's all registered. Yeah, and can be. You can see whatever a ton of ammonia reaches the end customer, yeah, chemical company that uses the ammonia to make fertilizer out of it. Yeah, in the end, the auditors can see till, like I said, to the renewable energy production, where did the electricity come from for the hydrogen production? Where was the hydrogen produced? How much CO2 was then there? How was it transported till it reaches the end customer? So you have the complete transparency. Of course, not every player has it. Yeah? I mean, you have to define who of the players can see what. Yeah, auditors can see, of course, the whole value chain, and therefore you have the complete transparency all the time. Yeah, and you have the overview, and you can show that at any time in the value chain. Yeah, so when it reaches the harbor and maybe CBAM in the future, the European regulation applies. Yeah, then you pull up the data, and the idea is to have kind of product passport. Yeah, but that's in the end just a layout. Yeah, but if you have the underlying data, you can simply pull it up in an analytics, yeah, and show, okay, at that time, okay, what was the state of the data? Yeah, what were the KPIs, yeah, from regulation, and how is the data compared to that KPIs? And you can digitally show that very easily. Yeah.
Perfeito. Quero agradecer, então.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I want to thank you, Peter and Vanessa, for your presentations. And we will have at the end our roundtable, and we will be able to ask you some more questions. So for now, I thank you. And I finish now on the first panel of hydrogen certification in Brazil. Now I want to invite a specialist of our second panel. Now we will talk about the Brazilian experiences in the hydrogen certification. So I want to invite Rodolfo, Aiex, General Manager for Customer Relations of the CCEE. Welcome, Rodolfo. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you. Welcome to you and all the participants and audience. I want to share now my slides with you. Can you see my slides? Okay, now we see it. Now we see it. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Rodolfo. I represent the CCEE, and we want to talk about certification of hydrogen in Brazil and the experience we are having. So, for you that don't know CCEE, I want to introduce CCEE quickly to you, explain who we are. We are a company in the electrical sector, and we are the operators in the Brazilian energy market. And how does this communicate with the certification? Our goal is to develop efficient, innovative, and sustainable energy markets for the benefit of society. And about that, we are working with the certification process for some time. We are working with that since 2015, working together with other institutions in the emission of the certificates. And how can we do that? Because today we have the generation and consumer information in our database. And we have also the contracts, and based on that, because of our interaction with the market, this is something we already have done. And it's good for the certification of hydrogen or other derivatives in our market. So now talk a little bit about the markets for certification in Brazil. Our country understands hydrogen as a low carbon hydrogen. So that's important to talk about that. But there are different markets, two different markets. Vanessa already talked about that. You have the export market as a voluntary market, and you have the domestic market. That is a market that you may have access if you comply with the legislation. So our focus today is more the export market, but we will talk a little bit about the domestic market too. So what we are doing, we began in 2022 in the development of the certification and the certification for the export to Europe. That is the RED II, that were the legislation for that time. In 2023, we began to work in the change of RED II and adapted to RED III. And the change, the difference was, one, we could make the percentage of the energy that was being using. And in the second one, we were measuring better the carbon quantity that is brought into the system. And we also, in the 23, we were very active in some national initiatives. In the PNH2, that comes from our Ministry for Energy. And we also helped in the executive and legislative branches to create the right laws. In 2024, our next step was to reach the recognition of our certificate in Europe, in the Union, European Union. So there are 2 or 3 institutions worldwide that already requested this recognition, and this is going forward. After that, we will have the implementations that I will show you soon, and then we will talk about the national market. So talking about the certification itself, so this was the first version, and we had this in 2023. In 2023, we had some pilot project certifications based on RED II, and we could measure them directly or off-grid or on-grid. But basically, the logic is how the energy, electric energy, was our main business. We are doing the certification through the electrolyzer route. And based on that project, we could certify 2 pilot projects, one with EDP and the second one with Furnas. And we will talk a little bit about the experience we had in Furnas. And these are projects that have the incentive of ANEEL, that is the entity that regulates energy in Brazil. And we got to very interesting conclusions. And the second moment that we are experiencing now, we need to update the certificate based on the new demands on the European market.
Of documents that need to be validated by the European Commission, which will take some time, and there is no precise date where we have sent documentation and the scheme in which we're working to be accepted. This is founded in the form of connection, where we have 2 possible pathways, where we have a direct connection to the grid, where everything is connected to the electrolyzer, but you need the grid to transport that energy. And there are other criteria that need to be met so that this is certified. The first criteria is that the grid is sufficiently renewable, which is called the pitching zone, translated to the Brazilian reality, the submarkets. In our case, in the northeast and the north of Brazil meet these requirements. in regards to the European Union. So if the source is of renewable energies, then there are other criteria also if you don't meet them. One of them is, okay, what is the emissions rate? And there is the possibility of entering the market if it is less than 18 grams of CO2. So there are these two calculations, the percentage of renewable energy rate, and in a 5-year window, what that rate is. Something else that is the constraint of principle, where in the grid you are in a condition that your energy generation is applicable. So if this is not satisfying, then there need to be made agreements, contracts, where there are different classifications to be certified. One is additionality, where if you have a hydrogen plant, then the generation of energy for that plant needs to be renewable. The concept of the energy source is quite different than what we have in Brazil. So in Brazil, it's 85% of renewable energy already, which is different from Europe. So additionality moves towards that principle. So it is in addition to what the electrolyzers produce. In the same time you're producing hydrogen, there is something that is quite limited, which has to do how much your electrolyzers are being fed with renewable energy, meaning that you can measure how you fare with that in terms of contracts, in terms of time. In 2028, if this is going to be flexibilized, that will remain to be seen, and that the same generation and production needs to attend the same submarket. There's another point which is important for the EU, which is governance, which has the strategic, tactical, and operational part. In the tactical part, it is about creating a certification system. From the operational point of view, it is about the bodies that will certify and audit these processes, and that there is a process of a platform, the European platform, where you have all these registrations and certifications. The logic behind this governance is that you have technical decisions is the way they need to be, and execute them the way they should be, in the market the way they should be. And you take together these informations. From the point of view of Brazil, this is an innovation that CCEE can attend to, of the renewable energy in a system that has a national grid connection, and there is a connection to information that comes together, where there is a concept that says all renewable energy generated, where you know where the source is, how much it turns out, when and where. So you have a whole list of attributes that you can create. You can see the whole generation happening. And on the other side, you have all the certificates that come from the electric grid. And here we can see the first ones regarding renewable energy, and the one in dark blue are additional certificates. So for the blue, for the Brazilian and the global market, what is the additional value that this energy is truly renewable, and that once it is certified, it comes out of the market stock and is distributed from this platform. It solves the problem of double accountability, which is something that we've been facing as an issue. It collaborates basically that in this scenario, we have been avoiding greenwashing. This is important for the whole chain. So if you are a hydrogen producer and you are selling, then your client will want to have a look into this. If it truly is based on renewable energies, this is a scenario where this can be guaranteed. In regards to Brazilian scenario, in a global direction, it provides guarantees that close the cycle. In 2025, we have a provision regarding the assets of the hydrogen production in Brazil. And this is here a very quick overview what is happening in our national scenario. There is a movement happening on the executive level and the legislative level. So all the technical part is done by the Ministry of Mines and Energy. There is also a group of participants that work transversally and discussing policies regarding hydrogen in Brazil. And the proposal was solutions for the legislation. So last year, a lot of that was happening. In this year, on the legislative level, there are things happening in the House of Representatives and the Senate. On the technical level, there's been a discussion. It's been discussed with different institutions and subsidies regarding the industry. But we can already look into what is already existing, our projects. There is public money being made available. So on a domestic level, this is something that is being closed up so that we can take further steps. And this is where I want to close.
Thank you, Rodolfo. It's great to see that we have a good movimentation. The chat people were really asking questions. And before we go over to the questions, I want to invite Hugo. He's manager at Eletrobras Furnas. Vitor, welcome. The floor is yours. I wish you a good presentation. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me, Fernando. So I want to show you some slides to show you the experience on Eletrobras in the sector of certification of renewable hydrogen.
Fernando, está vendo minha tela?
Estamos
Can you
vendo.
see my screen? Yes, we do see your screen. Thank you. So who is Eletrobras in this scenario? Eletrobras is the leader in Latin America for the electricity generation and transmission, and he obviously is part of the transition of energy. So Eletrobras is preparing itself to be the leader in the market of green hydrogen. We are looking for new clients. So we want to sell electric energy in forms of molecules. So seeing the Brazil map, you see the potential of Eletrobras in this market. Eletrobras has 74,000 kilometers of transmission lines with 305 substations, with 59 megawatts of total capacity, with 35 hydro plants, with 4 solar plants and 20 wind plants. So we have a huge grid of generation and transmission for renewable energy. Our clean energy sources represent 97% of our total energy. And 2024, we will reach 100% of renewable energy. To get into this market, we began to study hydrogen in 2018. And in 2020, we began with our pilot plant, and it's called Itubiara. And since 2021, we began the production, and we have already produced almost 5 tons. And it is really a significant amount because that's just a pilot plant. So it's a hybrid plant. We have solar plant, hydro plant, and we will expand this pilot plant for green ammonia and e-fuels. And the characters of this plant has 2 main origins. That is the hydroelectric, and we also use photovoltaic energy. And since 2021, we are operating with a startup that we closed yesterday for OEM. And so we studied the whole cycle, the whole chain of green hydrogen. And we have 18 months where we guarantee the best performance of a renewable hydrogen plant. And this startup is something very interesting, because a renewable hydrogen plant, when fueled with intermittent energy, the performances is much lower in comparison if he is fed by a constant origin. And that means you may have a 60% price difference. And if you are a hydrogen producer, you may be more or less competitive. So nowadays, through this startup, we can prove that a green hydrogen plant to have a viable production with a competitive price, you need to have a constant energy supply 24 by 7. So what a hydrogen producer needs to have a certification. You need to have an infrastructure to offer measurement points so you can check your whole production, the origin of your energy. So we did this together with CCEE, and we did adaptations, changes in our pilot plant, and we guaranteed that the certification entity has access to all information. So we created a module in our system to have online supervision. And this is our first certificate, Brazilian certificate, and it guarantees or certifies a production of 730 kilos of green hydrogen. And then we got a second certification that certifies the production of 1,330 kilograms of green hydrogen. That shows the market, not only the national market, but also the international market, that our hydrogen is being produced in our plant of Intubiaga that is fed by a hydraulic source and photovoltaic source, and that this energy is 100% renewable. And if you have a company that wants to be part of this process of certification, you need to buy green hydrogen and have a special project. You can talk to us at Eletrobras to create a project with us at a very low cost that's better for the market. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you very much, Vitor. So I want to make a suggestion. So we are receiving a lot of questions from the public, and maybe some of them we can also ask Peter and Vanessa what they think about it, to have this debate on our panel. So I compiled some of the questions, and maybe we can go directly to our roundtable. So I want to invite Peter and Vanessa to be part of our roundtable.
So first, going to a more general view that we saw in some moments, would be interesting to know your views in thinking about developing an integrated digital platform for certification, both for Brazil and the world. And I think it's very interesting what Peter showed in his slide regarding these different patterns when we look at the certification market. And it's truly like a zoo. I thought that was very interesting. So I would like to hear from you. What are the main challenges regarding hydrogen certification? So I would like to suggest to Vanessa and Peter to start off, and then maybe we can listen to Rodolfo and Vitor.
So I start. So the main challenges regarding certification, as we have already found out that there are different markets or different purposes for certification. So when we are now talking about challenges, I would focus now on certificates that are required from a regulatory perspective in order to be able to get, for example, incentives like it is the case for RFNBOs in the EU. And here it is really very important that the certificates are cannot be altered on purpose for betrayal. So it must be really safe, that such a certificate really proves that, for example, the hydrogen is green, since it also is involved with financial incentives. So this is, in my opinion, very important, that it is made absolutely secure and that no double counting can occur. And I also think that it's already quite a complicated process. I think it's important that it's made as easy as possible and at the same time as secure as possible. So that's from my side.
Yeah,
Vanessa.
I can only agree.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Is doing. I think it's really a challenge for regulators and politicians globally, yeah, because in different regions you have totally different in ideas. Yeah, for example, when you look at the US, I mean, it's really like, okay, how to best support the ramp up of the complete market. Yeah, okay, with the Inflation Reduction Act, it's you simply look at the production, and there's no there's no auction, there's no let's say big regulation. It's simply like you have to prove and give that and that data, yeah, maybe CO2 equivalents in an exact way, and then you get subsidies, or you don't get subsidies, in this case via tax discounts, and in other, let's say, regulations, it's really more like with rules. Yeah, you have to think about this, and you have to apply to, let's say, think, yeah. There are certain rules that you simply have to look at, yeah, and then let's say you get the stamp, yeah, and so there are different motivations in different countries. The same is with auctions. When you look at the contracts of difference scheme in Germany with Hintco, so Age Global Foundation, where they collected 4.3 billion euros already to be able to pay the difference between what they pay the suppliers and the let's say the demand side, yeah, that buys the hydrogen, in assuming that they have to, at the beginning of the market, pay more for the suppliers than they get from the consumers, and the state pays the difference. And there, of course, then you also have to, as a regulator, think about, okay, what are the rules that nobody cheats on you? That in the end they sell you high carbon hydrogen or derivatives, and in the end you destroy tax money, and give it to criminal organizations, more or less. So it's different backgrounds. And when you look at all, in the end, it comes back to data. And I think this was perfectly what Victor was saying. In the end, it's important that you have the data, in the most granular way, and then you can bring this data in the end even to your end customer through the whole value chain, so that they can simply trust you, that you not only have a document like this is the certification, and then what happens afterwards in the transport ways and so on, but that you have a dynamics, let's say, IT system that in the end shows you in each step what has been done, and that it's totally trustworthy, and still easy to implement and cost effective.
Obrigado, Peter. Rodolfo e
Thank
Vitor,
you,
fiquem à
Peter.
vontade também.
Okay, so Rodolfo and Vitor, please feel free to make your comments. Yeah, so I'll go first. I think there are a few challenges in terms of the industry. What we see today is that there is a very strong consumer side and with certain necessities, and there is a concentration in certain countries of production. So you see that there is a flow that is going to happen, but there's not one single hydrogen producer that will cover the whole market. So in this scenario, making this available, you need to join forces so that there is an equal relation in terms of certification. If you want to guarantee that it's renewable, that you need this certification for that. So you cannot have an individual certification for each producer. That's just not viable. So it is advancing towards a regulatory way of global measuring units, and that this issue can be solved that way. Of course, there are domestic preferences where each country wishes to give incentives to a certain part with different requirements. But if people don't want to observe these requirements, then, well, life goes on. From the point of view of the industry, so that things can really function, I think that you can see the platform that we have shown by CCEE. We don't see that in other parts of the world. There are centralized administration platforms. It's not everyone that can have this kind of stock management and distribution. That you can accompany this chain of logistics and indirect costs. These are points that were also shown by Peter and we heard about. So it would be interesting to have certain calculators where these measurements enter, and also monitoring devices and systems. I think these are those points.
Para produtor de hidrogênio renovável, é fundamental.
For a renewable hydrogen producer, a certification is basic because he will use this for an internal market as well for export. So this normatization is important because it makes the live interaction easier between this relationship between certifier and certifee. As Rodolfo said, it must respect the different markets because Brazil is a total different country, and because we are a renewable country in comparison to other countries. So we need to consider our own characteristics, because I may be more competitive with a lower price, and to respect another market, for example, my price may be a little bit higher. So the normatization is necessary, and it will help the life of the producer and also the certifying entity, but should not make the competitiveness of our country lesser. Thank you very much, Victor. So it was really interesting, all the points you brought up, because there are some things that can be models to be used everywhere in the development of local models. We have a European model, and then we can also use the C in Brazil for local production, or even the other way around. But each market is different, and we need to understand that there's no way to create an ideal world and have one model fits all. We need to adapt ourselves the best way we can. So I want to ask now the question that we received over chat, and whoever wants to answer, just let me know. Could you please go deeper in detail how the counting of the emission is being done in the certification here in Brazil as well as worldwide? Whoever wants to answer, please just go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I start. Yeah, I think it's when we talk about low carbon hydrogen and then products made out of it, ammonia and methanol. Of course, now the main topic here is now renewable electricity, and I think I provided the data how to calculate this, and it's all you can in the paper I mentioned in my slide. You can read the details. I think that's relatively clear how to do this. Even if regulation doesn't, let's say that it has to be that exact at the moment. Like for example, in Europe, it says, okay, you have to have hourly matching in 2030. If you do this now with our methodology and approach, you have now already 15 minutes matching, and therefore you already can provide your end customers the most exact data that is there, and even better than what the regulation will want from you in the future. But there are, of course, other ways how to use low carbon hydrogen. I mean, like blue hydrogen. I mean, with classical, you take natural gas, steam reforming, and then instead of the CO2 goes in the atmosphere, you do carbon capture and storage. And there, of course, you have to look at the whole natural gas value chain, because most of the emissions, of course, big part of the emission is when you go into steam reformer and the CO, and then you have the chemical reduction, when you get the hydrogen and the CO2 out of it. But big part of the emission is already happening from upstream, midstream, downstream in the gas value chain. And who looks at that? And there are organizations like the Open Hydrogen Initiative in the US, but it's also globally active, that look at these kind of value chains. And of course, because in the end there will be a hydrogen market, and there will be different sources how the hydrogen can be produced, low carbon hydrogen. And therefore we need a level playing field. It's not only renewable energy sources and water electrolyzers. There are other sources as well, which makes it even more complex. And here, let's say there are different initiatives globally that look at these in addition. I think for electricity, we know how to do this in the best way. I described that. Even if certain countries and regulations says, okay, we don't have to do this that exact at the moment with the aim to help the market grow faster, but you don't really need that. You can do this as much exact, and because the IT systems are there already and they are super cheap to implement. They are all cloud solutions, standalone solutions, so you don't need a complex SAP ERP system that it runs. These are all new solutions that are standalone. Of course, you can also integrate it into the logistics processes, but you don't need to, because we want that even non-SAP customers can use them. So that's the idea. So I think the water electrolysis topic is solved now. You can simply implement it, and for the other topics, there's still some work to do.
Obrigado, Peter. Alguém tem interesse em complementar? Rodolfo?
Posso falar pouco de como foi
Thank
feito.
you, Peter. I can talk a little bit about the project that we already had, our pilot projects. So you have the electrolyzer so you have the capacity of the electrolyzer and what goes in with energy, and you have the total capacity. So we need to understand that each case is a case. If you talk about low carbon hydrogen, I can say something, I cannot explain the other routes. So you need the calculation for that project specifically. If you understand the project specifically and you calculate the energy that entered, you will the product that is leaving according to the respective emissions. And to red-free, this calculation will still work, in my opinion, according to the criteria that were established. If you go and do the calculation right, and you just can go ahead. Thank you very much, Rodolfo. Vanessa?
I can also add something more from a regulatory perspective. It was also very obvious when we were looking on all these different schemes. So regarding the definition of RFNBOs, there were a delegated act called the Delegated Act to Article 28, which contains the green hydrogen gas calculation methodology in the case of RFNBOs. And this is an cradle to grave, or when we are talking about fuels, you can also say to wheel approach. So this means from in the case of electricity, so the sourcing of the electricity up to the final use of the product. When I now make an example, for example, for Brazil, this means hydrogen or ammonia would be produced in Brazil, is then transported to Europe and then used somewhere in Europe. And the green hydrogen gas emissions have to be calculated the whole way. So from production until use. So this also includes the transport, for example, in a tanker. This also will enter into the product carbon footprint of the product. So this is, of course, challenging, and the regulation is still evolving, but I think this is quite important to be known also for the project developers, since they need to know that the emissions that they are able, to emit, so at the gate, are much lower than the threshold value, for example, because you have to distract all the emissions of the transport.
Perfeito, obrigado, Vanessa. Foi bem legal.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. So it was just great, because during your speech, I was remembering the slides Peter showed of the whole journey that we need to look at it from the beginning to the end. And this slide shows that quite well, how to do this accounting. So there's a question that is mostly directed to you, Rodolfo. So just let's see if there's something mapped or not. How do CCEE is positioning itself for more routes beyond the route of electrolyzer, catalytic of biogas, butane? Nowadays, what we do actually comes from the electrolyzer route. That's our main competence right now. Do the certification in this route. Yes, we are very good at it. Any other route, we may look at it. We can do it, but there's no movement regarding that right now. The platform that we use for the electricity certification can have other inputs. So as a stock attribute source manager or other routes, it also could be used, but the competencies for other routes we don't have yet. Thank you very much. So we have another question, thinking about companies in clusters for the production of low carbon hydrogen. Is it possible to do a group certification? Is there clarity about these models for certification? Do you know something? Someone has knowledge about that? A group certification? No, I don't know any project like that. But it's also important to say that this industry is still being born. So anything that we say here may be old in 2 weeks. So thinking about the certifications that we did, each project is its own. So you have plans like Victor's ones, they have some measurements, some KPIs. So everything that you can measure, you can certify. That's the main concept, right? The basic concept. So if you use this same idea for a block, a group of plants, it may work. There are other criteria to be considered, geographic localization, but I'm really just putting some ideas out. These are projects that must be identified, and each project needs to be understood as a unique project for certification. But in thesis, if you can measure, you can certify. Someone else? Additional information?
Yeah, I totally agree. In the end, I mean, you have to if you have a group, that means you are a group of different producers. Yeah, it's of course you cannot simply make averages about them and then say, okay, from the average you take that data for the whole production. Yeah, because like I said, in the end, your end customers have totally different demands when it comes to quality. Yeah, and some maybe see it quite lax. Yeah, when it comes to CO2 equivalents, others see this very strict. Yeah, and therefore to make an average over large amounts doesn't make sense. I totally agree with the speaker before that in the end every project has to measure how the equivalents are, and then of course later you can do, like I said, product management and mix certain qualities together to have a certain price with a certain, let's say, quality in the sense of CO2 equivalents. Yeah, but in the end you need the underlying data, otherwise you cannot do this later. Yeah.
Perfeito. Pessoal, a gente chegou no limite.
Perfect. We reached our time limit. And to get to our closing part, I would like to invite you to say some final words about the discussion we had today. So maybe we can begin with Vanessa, Peter, Rodolfo, and Victor has the final word.
So should I start? Okay. Yeah. First of all, thanks. Was a really good discussion. Also, I learned a lot from Victor. I think when I look at Eletrobras and the project you described, what I understood today is that you have a unique advantage because because you have so much water power generated electricity in the background. Yeah, you can just add solar and wind. Yeah, and then still use the hours, the full usage hours, let's say from electrolyzer running perspective, yeah, coming from water, yeah, and you can prove it, and therefore you have an extreme cost advantage plus because you can run the electrolyzer full time and you can still prove that you have 100% renewables, yeah, which is an extreme, let's say, local advantage for you. Yeah. So and we can help you to prove that, yeah, for the whole value chain until it reaches whoever on the planet. Yeah. So I would say let's have a call to discuss more in detail. Yeah.
Obrigado, Peter. Vanessa, fica à vontade.
I also thought that it was very interesting, this discussion and also all the different perspectives. As Rodolfo has said, and I want to just bring it up again, we are still in a very, very early phase. I mean, even the underlying regulatory frameworks have not been defined yet to a sufficient stage. And we will see a very dynamic nature of the industry, which means that we will see regular updates and revisions. And this also necessitates that this kind of knowledge is brought to the public. So I think that these kind of talks are very, very relevant. And therefore, regarding the report that we have made together with GIZ on the project, here we would only want to invite readers of our study to approach this document as a starting point, so a base for further collaboration and also discussion on the path ahead. There will be more updates, and hopefully we will manage to come to a more harmonized state, and that global trade is possible with sustainable alternatives. Thank you.
Obrigado, Vanessa. Rodolfo, suas considerações?
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Rodolfo, your final considerations. I want to thank for the participation. It was really interesting because we have in a scenario where everything needs to be built, needs to be created. We see international speakers with a lot of knowledge, and if we are able to bring this together, we will get to a fantastic result. And this is a huge opportunity, maybe the biggest that we are seeing in the world nowadays, and maybe in our lifetime, to create something relevant where the collaboration is the main topic. It's the scenario If you just think about competition, you will lose because everything needs to be created from new. So I'm really hopeful about that. Thank you, Rodolfo. Victor, your final words. So the main goal of the renewable hydrogen producer is certification. So it doesn't matter if you produce good hydrogen if you're not certified. So the producer needs to be aligned with
os insumos que eles
norms.
precisam para emitir o certificado. Colaboração, como disse Rodolfo, é a palavra-chave para a gente
And he
construir.
needs the raw material to has a good production. Thank you very much, Victor. So with that, I want to thank you all, our speakers. I believe our discussion was really good, and we got different perspectives, different insights regarding the scenario of certification and how technology may be an ally, premises transparency. It's a rich discussion, and I want to thank you all. I want to thank our audience. We had over 100 people and at YouTube, and I want to thank our partner GIZ. And with that, I say goodbye and wish you all a good day. I see you soon.
Thank you.